I'm Morra Aarons-Mele, and this is The Anxious Achiever, the show that looks at the intersection of mental health and work, and how we can all do both better.
Hey, I'm Michael Kovnat, host of The Next Big Idea Daily. The show is a masterclass in better living from some of the smartest writers around. Every morning, Monday through Friday, we'll serve up a quick 10-minute lesson on how to strengthen your relationships, supercharge your creativity, boost your productivity, and more. Follow The Next Big Idea Daily wherever you get your podcasts.
Struggling to keep up with customers? With Agentforce and Salesforce Data Cloud, deploy AI agents that know your customers and act on their own. That's because Data Cloud brings all your data to Agentforce, no matter where it lives. Get started at salesforce.com/data.
Today is a conversation near and dear to my heart because Meredith Arthur is someone who, like me, didn't start out in the mental health space, but was driven there by passion, curiosity, and lived experience. Not at all to look over the importance of mental health professionals, doctors, psychologists, researchers, but sometimes it's good to acknowledge how having a peer, and data supports this, having a peer, someone who's been there to talk to and learn what works from them, can really, really help. So I always turn to Meredith's writing when I'm feeling a little stuck or I want inspiration. It's so helpful in dealing with whatever mental and related physical pain I might be going through. In her day job, Meredith is chief of staff at a product innovation lab at Pinterest. She's a wife and mom living in San Francisco. She's also a self-proclaimed skeptic. But in this conversation, we're going to get into why, in order to heal, sometimes you have to start truly believing. And we'll get practical. We'll hear about Meredith's cheat sheet for stress relief, something super helpful as we kick off 2025. First, we'll start with why Meredith started writing about mental health and wellness in the first place.
In particular, in 2015, after a series of startup adventures, misadventures, was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, created Beautiful Voyager, which is a content site and community for overthinkers, people pleasers, and perfectionists, and wrote a book called Get Out of My Head, Inspiration for Overthinkers in an Anxious World. That came out in 2020, in March of 2020. You know, my journey has never ended. It just keeps going. So I spend some time working on a nonprofit with the founder of Pinterest, Ben Silberman. The nonprofit is called How We Feel. It is a free emotion tracking app that is meant to help build emotional literacy.
With my hero, Dr. Mark Brackett.
Along with Dr. Mark Brackett, who I work very closely with. And I've been very lucky to spend a lot of time with a variety of academics as well as nonprofits. So I've had an unusual seat of learning, I think, actually. And I'm extremely curious. And so through this process, I've just been very proactively trying to learn and understand. What does anxiety mean? What is perfectionism? Where do these things come from? And more importantly, honestly, what are we supposed to do about them? I'm almost 10 years into this now, of spending a lot of time experimenting on myself, talking to others who are experimenting, trying to learn, like, what does it take to get better? And in the past year, I feel like I finally have hit some very sustainable new approaches that are helping me unlock some things that were very confusing for me for a very long time. Pain is at the center of this for me. Pain has always been at the center of it for me, but I never articulated it.
Physical pain.
Well, the weird thing about pain is it's the same thing. Whether you're having an emotion or a thought that's inside of your head, and that is painful, emotionally painful, or that same thing is expressing itself through your body in chronic pain, that's all the same thing. It's a matter of understanding how to read that signal, to understand what you're supposed to do with this, wherever the pain lives. And that has been, just a major unlock for me to understand what this pain was and what was it trying to tell me and what am I supposed to do with it?
In your philosophy behind your incredible, what you call your cheat sheet, is you say that if you can stop your nervous system from trying to protect you, you'll lessen your pain and quell your anxiety. Teaching yourself you're safe is where this work begins.
I had no idea, Morra. I had no idea until I did. And then when I learned that, everything changed. So it was like a before and an after of understanding that I really only have one goal. Like that is like the one thing that can orient me at all times. Is this introducing more tension into my nervous system, or am I learning to find safety internally in order to navigate everything that comes up in every human life? What is my window of tolerance, which comes up, as you know, in the piece? Like the window of tolerance is sort of your ability to navigate all of the things that are inevitably going to come up every single day of your life, and your ability to move through, to allow your nervous system to have its response, which it is supposed to have. It's supposed to protect us, and then be able to move back into what nervous system people call regulation. So just sort of a state of flexibility. And, polyvagal theory gets into this deeply, but there are different states of our nervous system. And so understanding how to navigate those different states and read them in yourself. So if you are sort of in this dorsal state is the description of polyvagal theory, dorsal meaning back, meaning I'm flattened, I'm laying down, I'm almost playing dead. I was in dorsal for quite a while. Doesn't mean it's singular, you're moving back and forth, but like if a lot of your time is spent in that state, you're dysregulated. Or, you've all heard about the sympathetic nervous system where fight or flight, you're like stressed and tense and anxious. If you're just flying back between those two, which I was for quite a while, you're never in a regulated nervous system state. So
that's a ventral state.
Ventral is sort of, everyone thinks, oh, I just want to be in ventral all the time. It's just not how the nervous system works. We're supposed to go into these different states. Things are coming up. But ventral is the one you want to bring a lot more into your life. And that is, interestingly, socially connected. So you start to understand, like, as I start to feel better, as I'm more regulated, I want to see people. I want to connect with people. And you can start to read these things in yourself as you understand the framework a bit.
I want to talk about polyvagal theory. I then want to go through your day because I think that that's a really great way to structure it.
Great.
I want to say, though, by starting out that the thing that really changed a lot of my nervous and anxiety life was polyvagal theory years ago with Captain Tom Bunn, who is a former airline pilot who is a social worker and therapist and early proponent of polyvagal theory. And the thing that he taught me, and his book, Panic Free, I talk about it all the time. Listeners, if you have trouble flying or being claustrophobic or just dealing with panic where you get extremely upset and dysregulated, is basically the simple exercise of connecting someone I love to a feeling state that stresses me out. And I'll always say this, when I couldn't fly when I was a new mother, he taught me how to summon oxytocin, the love hormone. And when we have oxytocin flooding in our body, we cannot feel stress. I would be on a plane. I would look at a photo of my baby and I can feel a letdown, like I'm about to nurse that baby. I can do it right now. I can look at a glass of water. I can look at a pen and I can summon that feeling. Now, I've been doing this for probably 12 years. It's been the single biggest trick because polyvagal theory means we are summoning that relational love that lowers our stress, right?
That's amazing. I had no idea that you had been using this for that long. And, what strikes me is and I heard you mention that once before. I don't know if we were texting, but I remember you saying that. And I thought that's brilliant because our brains are incredibly, you've heard of neuroplasticity. Our brains are plastic. They will imprint, they will take on information. You will, if you read about side effects of something and you think you may have it, your body will conjure those side effects. That's a fact. I know it's a hard thing to believe, like that pain could come from that sort of place, but that is how smart and incredible our brains are at trying to protect us. And what you do in that moment is to create a different internal space. You're kind of shifting yourself intentionally. That's a strategy to help you shift into ventral. You're like, you know what? I want to get out of, if you're using polyvagal. What's so interesting about all these things is you can translate these same ideas in lots of different techniques.
Absolutely. And also, I just want to say one thing. You do not have to be a mother who has breastfed a child to feel this. You can see the face, the voice, the touch of your dog, your father, your spouse, your good friend. I had a friend who used the method. She couldn't go on the New York City subway after the pandemic, and she trained her subway claustrophobia to twin with the image of her sister who she loved singing a silly song.
That's so beautiful. And if you are listening to this right now and you just have one of those beings, I'm looking at my dog right now, but like, you can bring that to your mind. I know that you can feel it. Like that feeling, what many people and what I never knew is to pay attention to it, to understand, like, I can do this intentionally. I can make this decision and do this. And I can sort of have a goal. Like that was really what I was missing. I didn't understand any measurement and I didn't understand goals around this kind of stuff. And now that is how I think about these things. And so these are really important tools to get out of pain, to help yourself move through pain.
Should we talk a little bit about polyvagal theory before we go into your day?
Sure.
What does polyvagal theory mean? Why are these exercises effective for you?
So polyvagal theory, by the way, is just one leg of my tripod, which when I wrote this ultimate stress relief cheat sheet, I was very hesitant because I thought, okay, now I'm really showing everyone like just how in depth I get into these things. And just there's just this like copious information coming forth. And I showed it to my husband before I sent it out. And he said, this is actually pretty good. Like, I think this is really helpful. This is actionable.
It's amazing.
And so then I sent it out, nervously. I mean, anyone out there who's listening, who's a writer, you know what it feels like. You're like, I don't know. I haven't read things like this out in the world. They're in pockets for sure, but I haven't read them in this kind of way. And then I got a text from Morra. Like just a few minutes. I mean, you read it so quickly and it made me think, you know what? That's all I need. All I need is to know that I'm able to connect with people who understand this world. That's my audience anyway. And so that felt really good. So thank you so much for that. And polyvagal was one of the 3 legs of the tripod. And the other 2 are clinical somatics, which is a practice of movement, very slow movement that I do in the morning to release tension from my muscles and to give my brain a place to land. Mornings have always been my most anxious time. And I, for years before my daughter was born, was doing a special form of Ashtanga yoga called Mysore. And I would get up at 5 a.m. and do it. And I always felt really good. And I was like, yoga is so amazing. But in retrospect, I realized I always need something. I need something to start my day that centers me, some practice that I can just go to in an almost automatic way. And bringing that back into my life has been just an anchor. I call it foundational, but that's how the day starts. And then I incorporate polyvagal exercises into it. And the goal of that is, again, you may have heard of EMDR. There are eye movements involved. Again, this stuff can sound a little strange if you haven't sort of dug into it. You're thinking, what? I'm going to move my eyes around and that's going to change how I feel. It does. It does. It does. Especially for somebody like me who has, some nausea and other issues, it really is helping my vagus nerve basically to function in the best way that I can. And then the third leg of the stool is mind-body syndrome. This is a whole world of work around pain management, basically. It starts with Nicole Sachs, who is a disciple of John Sarno. You may have heard of Dr. John Sarno. He did back pain treatments in the 70s and 80s, well, through till his death. Was a very important figure in this world of mind-body science who asserted that basically our nervous systems will make up the space. If we have emotional pain that our brain has decided is dangerous, it will invent new ways for us to feel pain. And so there's a whole world in that as well.
I want you to talk us through your day, and I know you'll narrate it with resources. I also just want to say for the audience that for me, early morning is my best, least anxious time. The past few years since I sort of stopped drinking, wake up feeling full of possibility. I look forward to my coffee. So I give myself the morning off from exercise. Everyone's different.
Everyone is so different. And that is crucial because, again, culturally, our cultural understanding is this is what happens if you get sick, you do this and you get better. It's not exactly right for emotional well-being, mental health. It's more individual. It's more confusing, just as our human brains and our human experiences are so individual.
So much trial and error.
It's so much trial and error, which is why I always say I'm experimenting on myself, because if you need this in the evening, again, you have to change, and clinical somatics may not be for you. The thing that every person needs, though, is a sense of safety internally. That is true universally. But everything about how to get there, what that means, how people interpret that changes for sure.
So clinical somatics, you wake up.
Yes. Okay. So I usually wake up around 5:30. 5:30 to 7 a.m. zone is my practice. So I go into a room, I unroll my yoga mat, and over time, it's been evolving. It started with me just simply following Sarah Warren's clinical somatics, which is I'm linked to, and I've done interviews with her. She is, again, second generation. So the first generation of somatics was Thomas Hanna. He was incredible. He died in a car accident way too young. It's taken time for this understanding of the body and muscles to start to percolate out. So the idea is that for some of us, our muscles are sort of in a hypertonic state. That just simply means it's not fully clenched and tense. It's not fully relaxed. We're sort of like stuck in the middle, which I always felt, but I never had words for.
I'm literally feeling my trapezoid right now, which is locked up. Yeah. Oh.
And so there are many, many exercises to work on trapezoid. For example, I did trapezoids this morning. It is not that complicated. The words I'm saying may sound complicated. It's very easy to follow. Your job is to move very slowly, to tense your certain muscle groups, understand what you're focused on, be focused on that muscle group, tense the muscle, and then very slowly relax it. And you're doing that throughout your body. There are 2 levels of the course, and then you can sort of play with doing different exercises on your own. So in the beginning, I just followed exactly what she said. And the program is, we're going to start by learning this. You're going to do this for 3 days. You're going to do this. You're going to do this for 3 days until you're getting to a point of facility and understanding. In the beginning, it's like, this is a very old movie that I want to reference, but Dennis Quaid in Inner Space.
Oh, dear God.
Meg Ryan and Dennis. It was a very, very long time ago. But I remember it from my childhood. And it was a movie where they were scientists who were shrunk into a tiny capsule and inserted into someone's body and moving around inside the body. And the idea was like inside the body is as surprising and confusing as going to outer space, right? That's the premise. And so that's how I feel doing somatics. Like, what? There's a whole world in here. What is this connected to? And so I started learning how the muscles connect to each other. And where's my attention as I'm thinking about the relaxing? Am I allowing it to relax? What does it feel like? You spend some time in the beginning just feeling what you're feeling. And then at the end, again, you're checking in to be like, how did it change? What changed? So every morning I do that.
And the course is online, right? You didn't have to go to a fancy spa or like...
You don't have to go to a fancy spot. And I think, by the way, that is one of the things that kept me from finding these things is I never knew where to go or what to do. It's very clear to me now, but it took a lot of trial and error to get there. And by the way, finding clinical somatics was the result of being in terrible, terrible hip pain, Googling, finding a book that dealt with my exact iliopsoas issue by Sarah Warren, buying it, not touching it, putting it on a shelf. Again, this is how it goes, right? Until it got worse and worse and worse. And I didn't know what I was going to do. My husband was like, well, maybe hip replacement. I was like, this is what? So then I got desperate enough to read the book and Googled again, found this course, did the course and realized, hey, wait, this is changing my relationship to my body. This is changing how I live inside of this body. And so the course is online. I think it's $40 for level 1. That lasts a month and a half. You do it every day. It's around 20 minutes to a half an hour a day. And if it starts working for you the way it did for me, you'll probably want to do level 2 as well. But then you have it forever. So you've spent, I think it's something like $70 total. And this is knowledge you have for the rest of your life.
So you do the somatics in the morning, and then do you also do polyvagal exercises while you're on the mat?
I do. So over time, it's evolved. I've started to incorporate polyvagal into my exercises. So it's sort of a hybrid somatic polyvagal, as well as like there's a breathing element at the end, which I go into Breccia breath. The reason that the breathing is so important is that if you do tend towards an anxious state or your disposition or your physicality like leads you there, dysregulated nervous system, you probably are not getting enough oxygen. You're probably not able to like relax and deep belly breathe. I didn't even understand belly breathing, by the way. I had to learn how to do all of this. I had to learn to relax my belly. I had never done that. I was not taught to do that. And people would say words and I was like, I don't understand what that means. But now, again, I had to learn what it feels like. But the first thing I do if I start feeling really tense is to just like let the belly out, almost like a pot belly. And you're not totally pushing it, but like basically you're trying to allow your diaphragm so the diaphragm's like a bowl. I'm showing Morra on a screen, but it's like a bowl and then it pushes down flat. And that's why your belly goes out. So this is the diaphragm. Contraction of the diaphragm is flat and that pushes your belly out. Again, these are the kinds of images I needed to have to be able to do this. Everything that I talk about is widely available out in the world. The thing that I try to do is to just tack on a little bit of detailed digging through reality of like, this is actually what it feels like. This is actually what it took for me to do it. That's what I feel like my addition to this work is.
I know, but it's so valuable.
Good.
You know, it's funny. Let's talk for a minute about the basic exercise.
Okay.
Not to narrate it so that people can do it listening, but to give folks a sense of what it's like.
Yeah. So the basic exercise is a polyvagal exercise written up. I learned about it through Stanley Rosenberg. Did you find out about it in a different way? Stanley Rosenberg is a disciple. Again, we're in the second generation terrain. So it's like a lot of this stuff was being discovered or learned in the 70s and 80s. And now we have the second generation, second wave that's like starting to really interpret it. I'm also excited about the third wave, which I think will be like integrating, mainstreaming.
Struggling to meet the increasing demands of your customers? With Agentforce and Salesforce Data Cloud, you can deploy AI agents that free up your team's time to focus more on building customer relationships and less on repetitive, low-value tasks. That's because Data Cloud brings all your customer data to Agentforce, no matter where it lives, resulting in agents that deeply understand your customer and act without assistance. This is what AI was meant to be. Get started at salesforce.com/data.
So I have to tell you that my mother, when she was separating and divorcing my father all those years in the 80s and early 90s, became a pagan and was very into like women's everything, like women's separation, women's lib and natural health, and introduced me to craniosacral therapy when I was 12, 10. I don't even know. Which when you're a kid, you're like, this person is not doing anything. They're just holding my head. What's happening? But as I grew older, I did a little bit of it. And then I found Rolfing, which is all sort of related, right? Stanley Rosenberg, I think, trained as a Rolfer.
Oh, absolutely. Right? Trained as a Rolfer, like very connected. The viscera and working on the viscera and the relationship of the viscera. People that are into this world are like, yeah, of course. Yeah.
All this body work. And so I'm throwing this out there for the audience to say that if you feel like physical manipulation is kind of your jam, like if you like going for massages or, have a look into all these different kinds of body work because they are connected to the nervous system.
Absolutely. You know what's so strange, though? I had craniosacral treatments for years in my 20s when I lived in Seattle and was having terrible migraines. I don't know if they helped me or not. It didn't seem as though they helped me. If they didn't, I will say that I think one of the reasons is that I didn't understand how they were supposed to help me. And the brain, again, I'm just going to keep repeating, but the neuroplasticity of the brain means that our understanding and connection and belief actually makes a huge difference.
Belief
yes. Is everything. So one of the things that I had to do as I was starting to write about this was to accept that there are things that I will be talking about that will cause skepticism in people. I understand that. I accept that. I am married to a very skeptical person. I am a skeptical person. But at some point I understood I will not heal unless I start to truly believe in my tripod, in how these things work. And I'm going to believe so much that it is going to be unshakable. And it has been, and it has worked. So I think that element has to go hand in hand when we talk about these treatments, because I think that, and I'm not saying just make yourself believe. That is not going to work. Like this has to be so authentic within you. You have to deep down wrestle and think about, or whatever path you use. I'm so cerebrally oriented that I have to really understand the mechanics to believe.
Yeah, I'm not.
Which is great. It might make it easier.
I just believe.
Might make it easier. It probably will make it easier.
I don't think so, because you have the discipline. I fall off on the discipline because that is the thing, is that you have to do this crap.
Yeah, you have to do this crap. You have to do this crap a lot, because you're right. We've only talked about the morning, and that is really intense, right? So ends around 7:15, get daughter to school, walk the dogs before my work day starts. So my work day usually starts around 9. A walk, by the way, it's not a sexy topic, but walking actually is incredible for us. Try to walk. That is here's a good tip. Try to walk. But again, I've always been a walker, but what has helped me commit to more walking is, for me, a mechanical understanding of the body and understanding how to lower the barrier to entry for myself. So then workday starts, right? Things are happening, coming in and out. Now, what has changed in the past year about my workday is that I am very intentional about shifting gears throughout the day. Small, steady changes are what help with nervous system dysregulation. This means that anytime I notice myself start to get tense, I start to feel the trapezoids like you are, there is a okay, we got to chill it out. What are we going to do? Are we going to take 5 minutes and do a jigsaw puzzle at my table? What am I going to do to get myself into, again, does not matter what the action is. All that matters is what's happening internally. Can I get myself into an internal place of a little more ease? And then I can shift back to doing work. But you're basically teaching yourself to shift, to down regulate. There are different ways of putting it. And then, usually end of day, walk again, walk the dogs. And then there's a food component that I'm working on as well. But, so there's a lot of different layers of this. And I don't want anyone to listen to me like, that's overwhelming. That's just so much work. Because it is more about learning to incorporate what works for you. Each person will have different needs, and you can start real small. You can start with just like some small things to try, knowing, again, what all that matters the most is that your goal is internal safety. Internal safety is what you're going for. So maybe it's journaling, and definitely journaling practices are important, especially when you're dealing with all of the emotional pain that can come alongside physical pain.
Talk a minute about that. You use Nicole Sachs's methodology of journal speak?
I do journal speak. Probably I could do it more, but again, how much time can I spend a day on all these things? But I tend to use Nicole Sachs's journal speak if there's something that is really triggered or flared. So if, sort of out of the blue, something hits me, or I just, those days. And I know, okay, it's all about what's the regulation strategy here. Sometimes the regulation strategy is physical. Sometimes it's emotional. If it's an emotional regulation strategy, I'm tapping, I'm journaling. This is what's so fascinating to me is like, it's a spectrum of many colors that you can try to play with to understand. Smells, that's huge. Like if you understand the impact of the senses on the nervous system, the same as you described that beautiful image of the oxytocin as you thought about your son, we can transport ourselves with smell. A coffee house. Let me just say, like piping hot coffee, right? Even if I say it, you can feel it. You can feel it. Like if you like coffee. If you don't, maybe it's freshly mowed grass in the summer.
Orange. I always like to smell orange peel.
Oranges. Like it's so evocative, and it's so these are not difficult.
So what is that doing when I'm smelling? Why is that good for my nervous system?
So the reason that engaging with our senses is so important, and you may have heard of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, spot 5 things in the room. You're using all of your senses. Listen for sounds, 3 smells. That is a very common grounding practice. Grounding brings us into the present moment. So what you're looking to do is to create space for your brain the same way mindfulness does. Many practices are working to help you get out of your own overthinking brain and sort of allow your body and nervous system not to live in the fear, not to, what can you do to interrupt the fear? Because often these thoughts are, sort of cyclical, and they will pass. They will pass. But what are you going to do to help yourself as you're waiting for them to pass?
Right. Or maybe the way you're currently trying to get through the thoughts isn't helping you.
Exactly. Maybe you're doubling down. Maybe you're doing these coping strategies. And, again, coping strategies are different than regulation strategies. Coping strategies, drinking, whatever, they're not always bad. I always say, like, if you're under a lot of natural stress that happens in life, coping makes perfect sense. There's nothing wrong with coping. It's just when you're in persistent dysregulation and coping over and over and over and getting into really bad, deep habits that will hurt you quite a bit.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us are just sick of taking so much friggin' Advil. Like, I think that there's also what I find is, sort of, as you would say, a fellow Voyager who deals with chronic pain that is highly sort of psychosomatic also, is like, I don't want to take drugs. Doctors are always giving me muscle relaxants, and I can't live that way.
I mean, I did live that way for a long time. I have been on so many different migraine meds. I have been on, and opioids for migraine. Like, I was there. It's really interesting because when I started Beautiful Voyager, I had in mind, I want to help people who are in pain. I want to help people, with this, what felt like an impending opioid crisis, which did end up happening. And pain has always been very understandable to me and very clear to me why people land in addiction behaviors with coping and why they land in opioid issues. It makes total sense, right?
Of course it
is. And
is.
I also have, in the past year sort of gone off of my SSRIs, that has been a difficult journey. All of these things are, you use the tools when you need the tools. And when you're able to, if you're able to shift that a little bit and improve, you start to be able to get into a virtuous cycle of being able to let go of those things if you can. So I'm with you. Like, I was taking things that I know were not great for me to be taking, and I'm glad not to have to do them. But I certainly also understand why anyone is in a stage of looking for those things.
I want to end by saying, the thing I love most about Meredith's approach is that it is a full body experience. I hate when people are like, just go meditate. A lot of us that doesn't work for. We're already in our heads enough. And so I will share all of your stuff and just encourage the audience to sort of get into your body and start paying attention to your body.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I also hope that people share what's working for them. Because again, if we have this palette of tools, like, let's widen our palette. The more we can all just keep telling each other, this worked for me. You want to have the biggest toolkit you could ever imagine. So speak up, comment, share what's working. Like, we can help each other through this.
That's it for today's show. Our show is produced and edited by Mary Dew. Our assistant producer and sound engineer is Nick Krinko. Many thanks to the LinkedIn Presents family, to all of our guests for sharing their stories, and to our advertisers who bring you the show. If you love The Anxious Achiever, tell your friends. Subscribe, leave a review, follow us. You can also tweet me at MorraAM or find me on LinkedIn, where you can follow me, message me, or subscribe to my newsletter for more from the Anxious Achiever world. Thanks for listening.